450 years before the Common Era, under the blazing Persian sun, a living map of the world slowly ascends the wide steps of the Apadana. Today is the day of tribute. In 450 before the Common Era, representatives from 23 nations, including Armenians, Babylonians, and Ethiopians, bring gifts to the King of Kings in Persepolis. The Armenian delegation carries intricately crafted silver vessels shaped like griffins. Behind them, the Ethiopians lead a long-necked exotic animal, a gift from distant lands. The air hums with a chorus of languages, scented with incense and warmed stone. This is no mere tax collection. It is a ritual, a powerful affirmation of order and unity within the greatest empire the world has ever seen. 120 years later, the same city, the same stone masonry, but now the air reeks of acrid smoke, not incense. Cedar beams in the ceiling, brought all the way from Lebanon, collapse in a fiery rain. In the year 330 before the Common Era, an Athenian courtesan named Thais stood at a feast. She raised a torch and sparked the city's destruction. 200 years of painstaking construction, the work of tens of thousands of skilled artisans from across the empire, all reduced to ashes in a single night. The greatest symbol of order and creation, destroyed in a drunken fit of revenge. One person, one torch. This city was built as a stage for unity, but they destroyed it in the name of division. Free laborers built its walls, paid in silver and grain. Yet history remembers it as a monument to tyranny, burned down by liberators. We will bring it back from the ashes, guided by archaeological evidence and ancient texts. Walk with me through its halls, meet the faces of its builders, and witness that fateful night. Only then can we understand what truly happened. The irony starts with the name itself. Persepolis is a Greek name meaning city of the Persians. It was given by those who destroyed it. The original builders called it something else, Parsa. To grasp the tragedy, we first need to understand the dream. Why build a city unlike any other capital in the ancient world? In 522 before the Common Era, Darius seized the throne of the Achaemenids and became the ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen. His power stretched from the arid valleys of the Indus River in the east all the way to the Greek city-states along the Mediterranean coast in the west. Under his rule, 50 million people lived, perhaps half the planet's entire population at the time. This vast patchwork quilt was made up of 23 provinces called satrapies, each with its own language, gods, and customs. Governing this empire meant more than just collecting taxes and crushing rebellions. It meant convincing an Egyptian priest, a Bactrian warrior, and a Lydian merchant to share a single, unifying vision of order. Darius already had 3 capitals for day-to-day governance: Susa, where the court spent the winter, Ecbatana, a summer retreat nestled in cool mountain air, and ancient Babylon, the economic heart of Mesopotamia. These cities buzzed with activity. Wheels creaked over cobblestones, scribes filled clay tablets, and messengers raced along the royal road. But Darius wasn't interested in building just another administrative hub. He wanted a ceremonial center, a grand stage for the entire empire. He needed a city not for living, but for spectacle. A place where once a year, representatives from every nation would gather, not merely to pay tribute, but to take part in a magnificent performance. In this drama, they played the subjects, while he took the role of King of Kings, the guarantor of universal order. This scene couldn't take shape amid the hustle and bustle of old cities. It demanded a pure, sacred space, right in the heart of Persian lands, in Pars. They chose a spot at the foot of a mountain, later called Ku-e-Ramat, the Mountain of Mercy. Here, on a wide plain beneath the watchful eyes of eternal cliffs, an imperial dream was destined to come alive. But such a grand vision couldn't rest on ordinary ground. This cosmic stage required a fitting foundation, a pedestal raised high above the world of mortals. In 518 years before the Common Era, at the foot of Mercy Mountain, known to the Persians as Kui Ramat, the first hammer struck stone. This wasn't the sound of building another palace. It was the sound that marked the birth of a new world. Darius's engineers didn't just adapt a city to the landscape. They reshaped the very earth, crafting an artificial horizon for their imperial vision. They began by leveling a rocky outcrop. Then, they started constructing a massive terrace. The engineers designed an artificial platform spanning 13 hectares. That's the size of about 18 football fields, lifted high above the plain by retaining walls reaching up to 18 meters tall, about as tall as a modern 6-story building. Millions of tons of earth and rubble filled this colossal foundation, transforming a jagged mountainside into a perfectly flat surface. Workers quarried massive blocks of dark gray limestone just a few miles away. The stone's quality was exceptional, with surfaces smooth and pristine. Day and night, a steady hum filled the plain, the rhythmic pounding of thousands of stonemasons' hammers, the creak of wooden levers lifting multi-ton blocks, and the muffled commands of overseers. The stone blocks fit together so precisely that not even a knife blade could slip between them. They didn't use mortar to hold the blocks in place. They relied on their own weight, forming a solid, monolithic wall. But this wall was not part of a fortress. It lacked arrow slits, battlements, or any signs of defensive structures. Its perfectly polished surface stood exposed to every wind and gaze. This wasn't a shelter, it was a stage, built with complete confidence that the empire had no enemies. The monumental effort of thousands focused not on protection, but on display, crafting a pedestal from which Achaemenid power would be visible to the entire world. Ancient monumental constructions often get linked to slave labor. It feels natural to imagine thousands of people, driven by whips, forced to build those massive cyclopean structures. This image has become deeply ingrained in our minds. But when it comes to Persepolis, it turns out to be false. The answer didn't come from royal decrees, it came from dust beneath archaeologists' feet. In the 1930s, researchers from the University of Chicago uncovered tens of thousands of clay tablets. These weren't sacred texts, but dry administrative records, payrolls, detailed accounting logs from the grand construction project. Decoding the Elamite cuneiform on these tablets upended everything we thought we knew about Persian society. It turned out the city wasn't built by slaves, but by hired workers. They were paid in kind, with wine, sheep, and grain. Each record lists a name, a profession, and the rations they received. These worker lists form a map of the empire itself. The workforce was truly international. Stonemasons from Persia worked alongside decorators from Egypt, while sculptors from Greek Ionia carved details next to craftsmen from Babylon. Everyone earned wages suited to their skill. The overseer received more, the apprentice less, but no one worked for free. But the most striking lines in these ancient records reveal a surprising approach to social policy. Women worked alongside men, and they earned equal pay for equal work. Even more impressive, the administration kept detailed records of new mothers. Young women received special postpartum rations, extra grain, and wine. This wasn't just charity. It was a well-planned support system designed to ensure that both mother and child wouldn't go hungry during the most vulnerable time. 2,500 years ago, the Persian state provided its working women with what we would now call paid maternity leave. Persepolis was a project of unity from the very beginning. It didn't just depict 23 conquered peoples on its reliefs. It was built by their own hands. Unlike the forced labor behind the Egyptian pyramids, this was the work of free people who were paid, fed, and counted. The idea of an empire uniting diverse cultures took shape not only in stone, but also in how the labor was organized. On the Great Terrace, free craftsmen began constructing buildings meant to show the world the harmony of dozens of peoples under a single king's rule. Anyone arriving at the Great Terrace, whether a satrap from Bactria or an ambassador from Greece, began their journey here. At the western entrance to the ceremonial complex, two colossal guardians stand carved from a single block of stone. These are giant winged bulls with human faces. Their stone beards twist with mathematical precision, and their eyes peer through the centuries, coldly appraising every visitor. The passage between them is narrow. Even on the hottest day, the chill radiating from these 15-foot statues is unmistakable. Each step on the stone slabs echoes loudly in the silence. It feels less like passing through a gate and more like stepping through time itself. This structure, built by Darius' son Xerxes, is known as the Gate of All Nations. Inside, a spacious square hall measures 25 by 25 meters. 4 massive columns once held up its lofty cedar ceiling. Stone benches line the walls, the only furniture in the room. Here, in the cool shade, delegations waited their turn before gaining access to the heart of the palace complex, a space for waiting and realization. The first display of imperial scale before you even see anything else. The guardians at the entrance, the Lamassu, aren't a Persian invention. They come from the defeated Assyrian Empire, a symbol that inspired fear across Mesopotamia for centuries. But the Persians didn't erase foreign gods or symbols. Instead, they absorbed them, reinterpreted them, and put them to work for their own purposes. In Assyrian palaces, the Lamassu stood as fierce protectors of royal power, ready to tear apart any enemy. Here, in Persepolis, their role shifts. They no longer threaten. They stand as keepers of order, symbols of wisdom and strength, guarding a world united under a single king's rule. After passing through this hall, visitors move toward the eastern exit, guarded by another pair of mythical creatures. Stepping through these gates meant leaving the dim shadows behind and entering blinding sunlight. Before the eyes of any envoy or tribute-bearer stretched a scene destined to be etched into their memory forever. The cool shade of the stone sentinels faded away, revealing ahead the vast plaza crowned by the most magnificent structure in Persepolis. Before any visitor stepping out of the Gate of All Nations stretches a stone forest. This is the Apadana, the Hall of Receptions. 72 columns rise skyward, vanishing into the height above. Each one stands 80 feet tall, the same height as a modern 8-story building. Their slender, fluted shafts create a sense of endless space, a vastness that overwhelms and inspires at once. The entire hall covers nearly 130,000 square feet. During grand receptions, it could hold up to 10,000 people at once, the empire's entire elite, from satraps to military commanders. The hall is cloaked in cool half-darkness. Light slips in only through openings near the ceiling, reflecting off polished stone surfaces. High above, massive beams of precious Lebanese cedar form the ceiling. The wood, soaked in resin, gives off a faint pine scent that blends with the aroma of incense. Thin sheets of gold leaf cover the wood's surface, flickering softly in the dim light to create a starry canopy above the guests. The column capitals take the shape of paired bull or griffin heads. More than just supports, they bear the full weight of imperial grandeur. To enter this hall, you have to climb one of 2 grand staircases. Their walls serve as a stone encyclopedia of the Achaemenid Empire. You won't find scenes of battles or executions here. Instead, there's an endless procession frozen in stone. The reliefs depict the Nowruz parade with documentary precision. All 23 peoples of the empire, from the Lydians to the Indians, march in strict order, leading animals and carrying gifts. Each group is instantly recognizable by their clothing, hairstyles, and facial features. This isn't mere decoration, it's ideology cast in stone, a timeless reminder that all roads lead to Persepolis, to the throne of the King of Kings. Here, the empire showcased its unity through ritual and diplomacy. But when it came to displaying military power, the king had another hall, an even larger one. If the Apadana served as a stage for diplomacy, The neighboring hall was a theater of war. This was the throne hall, also known as the Hall of 100 Columns. It surpasses the Apadana in size. Instead of 72 columns, it holds exactly 100, packed tightly together, creating not a sense of spaciousness, but an overwhelming mass. The air feels heavier. Footsteps sound muffled. The wall reliefs tell a different story. Instead of peaceful processions, the king battles mythical beasts, winged lions and bulls. He pierces them with his spear, asserting his role as protector of order against the forces of chaos. This is where the king met with his commanders, where ranks of fully armored elite guards known as the Immortals stood, and where plans for campaigns that determined the fate of entire peoples were forged. Beyond the official halls stood the private palaces of Darius and Xerxes, more secluded yet no less lavish living spaces hidden from the eyes of foreign envoys. But the true economic heart of the entire complex was the treasury. Not just a storage room, but the empire's financial center. Within its cool, heavily guarded chambers lay tribute from every satrapy: golden rhytons from Lydia, silver bars from Egypt, lapis lazuli from Bactria. Creaking carts delivered these riches, while scribes meticulously recorded every gram on clay tablets. From here, silver and grain flowed out to the very builders who raised these walls. Bank, treasury, and logistics hub, all housed in a single building that fueled the imperial machine. But Persepolis' most brilliant engineering feat remained hidden from view, deep beneath the stone slabs. The entire massive platform is threaded with a complex network of underground water channels. This system, known as qanats, forms a true subterranean city. Carved into the rock several meters below ground, these tunnels collected groundwater from the surrounding mountains and distributed it throughout the complex. They fed fountains in the royal gardens, supplied fresh water to the palaces, and drained excess during storms, protecting the buildings from damage. Thousands walked across those stones, unaware that a river flowed right beneath their feet. Halls for diplomats, chambers for warriors, palaces for kings, and vaults for their treasures. This was an entire ecosystem of power, ticking with the precision of a finely crafted clock. But even the most precise clock exists to measure the time leading up to one crucial moment. All this might, all the stone and gold, served as a backdrop for a single day each year, the true soul of Persepolis. This colossal structure of stone, power, and wealth wasn't built for war or everyday rule. It was designed for a single annual event, Nowruz, the Persian New Year celebrated on the spring equinox. For most of the year, this city stage stood nearly empty, its halls echoing only with the footsteps of guards. It waited for that one moment when day equals night, when nature awakens from its winter slumber. On that day, Persepolis stopped being just stone. It became the heart of the world, pulsing with the lifeblood of the entire empire. This celebration, whose name means New Day, has deep roots in Zoroastrian tradition. For the Persians, it marked more than just the start of a new calendar year. It was a cosmic ritual, symbolizing the triumph of the supreme god Ahura Mazda, embodiment of light and order over the forces of darkness and chaos. Every spring, the world seemed to be born anew. Fire, sacred to Zoroastrians, took center stage in these ceremonies. Priests dressed in white kindled flames on altars, and the smoke, scented with juniper and sandalwood, carried prayers for fertility, justice, and prosperity to the heavens. As they celebrated Nowruz, everyone in the empire, from the king to the simplest farmer, became part of an eternal battle between good and evil, affirming life's victory through their ritual. The Achaemenid Empire vanished more than 2,000 years ago. The columns of Persepolis have turned to ruins, and the names of its kings live on only in history books. Yet the idea endured longer than stone. Today, 300 million people still celebrate Nowruz, from the Balkans all the way to Central Asia. This makes it one of the oldest continuous holidays in human history. Families gather around festive tables, light bonfires, and wish each other new happiness. The stone stage built for this celebration is gone, but the show goes on. The path to the Apadana unfolds under the open sky. The sun warms the stones beneath your feet, yet the walls radiate a coolness that offers relief. The air hangs heavy, thick with a complex blend of scents. The sweet smoke of incense burning in censers carried by priests mingles with the spicy aroma of roasted meat drifting from nearby kitchens. This fragrant trail follows the delegations along their entire journey. Above the roar of thousands of voices speaking dozens of languages, clear, high notes of flutes and gentle plucking of lyre strings float through the air. Musicians line the road, their melodies guiding the procession forward. Every moment of this scene, the Nowruz procession, has been captured in exquisite detail by the carved reliefs on the Apadana's staircases, immortalizing it in stone. A delegate, guided by a court official, finally approaches the throne. He kneels, extending his gift, finely crafted fabrics, a golden vessel, or a prized horse. But this is not the end of the ritual. It's only the beginning. The exchange of gifts was an act of reciprocity, not just a simple tax collection. The king didn't merely accept the offering. In return, he gave a gift that often exceeded the value of what he received. It might be an honorary robe, an intricately decorated weapon, or a heavy gold bracelet. This gesture transformed the subject into a partner, turning tribute into a symbol of loyalty and respect. The empire rested not only on the power of arms, but on this delicate web of mutual obligations and generosity. After the ceremony, the feast began, an event that stunned the imagination. Each day of the celebration, they fed 15,000 people. Hundreds of cooks worked in massive kitchens behind the palaces, preparing meals for everyone, from satraps and ambassadors to guards and servants. The Greek historian Xenophon, who knew Persian customs well, noted that the royal chefs constantly crafted new dishes. Complex sweet and sour stews and rice dyed with precious saffron. This generosity wasn't reserved for the elite alone. Even ordinary laborers, according to payment records, received extra rations of wine and meat during the festivities. On those days, everyone in Persepolis, from the king on his throne to the stonecutter in his humble hut, joined together as guests in the empire's grand celebration. In 334 years before the Common Era, the steady, eternal rhythm of Persepolis shattered. Far to the west, thousands of miles from its ceremonial halls, a new and relentless force invaded Persia. Leading it was a 22-year-old king, Alexander the Great. In just 4 years, he crushed the Achaemenid Empire, a state built over 2 centuries, as unshakable as the rocky slopes beneath the Mountain of Mercy. The tide of conquest rolled forward without mercy. First came the battle at the Granicus River, then a devastating defeat of the Persians at Issus. Finally, the decisive clash at Gaugamela, after which the Persian army ceased to exist as a unified force. The King of Kings, Darius III, the heir to Cyrus and Xerxes, fled the battlefield. Once ruler of the world, he became a hunted exile. Satrapies surrendered one after another. Ancient capitals like Babylon and Susa opened their gates without a fight. The empire had fallen. In January of 330 before the Common Era, the vanguard of the Macedonian army reached Persepolis. The city had never been a fortress. It had no massive defensive walls. Its only protection was its grandeur, and its sole weapon was authority. It did not resist. The guardian of the Royal Treasury, a Persian named Tiridates, sent out a messenger to meet Alexander and open the gates to the conqueror. The Macedonian army entered the great platform not to the clash of swords, but in silence. The columns of the Apadana greeted them with quiet. The reliefs on the staircases stared at the new rulers with the same impassiveness they had shown toward earlier tributary processions. Alexander stepped into the city as a sovereign handed the keys to the very heart of a fallen empire. but his triumph carried a shadow. On the way here, in the mountains, he had already seen something that would turn this bloodless victory into the prelude to brutal revenge. On his way into the city, even before his army entered the grand halls, Alexander came across 800 Greek artisans. These were elderly men, once brought here by the Persians from Ionian cities. But they weren't just prisoners. They were kept as living tools, deliberately maimed to erase any chance of escape. One had lost an arm, another a leg, and a third bore a branded mark burned into his face. They stood as walking proof of the empire's cruelty. For Alexander, raised on the ideals of Greek freedom, this scene felt like a personal insult. His cold political calculation as a conqueror gave way to blind fury. What had started as a war for territory became a war for revenge. The Macedonian army occupied Persepolis for 3 months. But this wasn't a time to rest. It was a period of systematic, organized plunder. Soldiers broke into the treasury, the financial heart of the empire, and started hauling out everything accumulated over generations. 120,000 talents of gold and silver, a fortune vast enough to fund endless war. Precious vessels, royal garments, weapons inlaid with gems, they piled it all into heaps, preparing it for shipment. According to Plutarch, moving the treasure required 10,000 mules and 5,000 camels. For weeks, this endless parade of loaded animals stretched westward, carrying away the wealth that had built and sustained Persepolis. The climax came in April or May of 330 years before Christ. At the palace of Xerxes, the great enemy of Greece, Alexander hosted a feast for his generals. Wine flowed freely, the air thick with torch smoke and loud laughter. In the midst of the revelry, an Athenian courtesan named Thais, companion to General Ptolemy, spoke up. She reminded everyone that 150 years earlier, the Persian army, led by Xerxes himself, had burned the sacred Acropolis in her hometown of Athens. She called for revenge, to burn the barbarian capital in return. The drunken crowd roared. Seized by the moment, Alexander grabbed a torch and led the procession. Thais herself threw the first torch, straight onto the palace walls of Xerxes. Built from dry Lebanese cedar, it burst into flames instantly, like a funeral pyre. The fire started as a drunken act but quickly spiraled into an uncontrollable blaze. Flames jumped from Xerxes' palace to the roof of the Apadana. Golden plates on cedar beams melted, dripping down like fiery rain. Soon, the hall of 100 columns caught fire. The flames even reached the already looted treasury. A city built over 200 years by free craftsmen from around the world burned to the ground in just a few days. At night, the glow was visible for miles, lighting up the plain as if a second hellish sun had risen. 2,500 years later, the wind still moves through the broken columns. The once bright, dark gray limestone that gleamed in the sun now bears permanent scars. Black burn marks remain etched into the stones, physical proof of the night when Thais threw her torch. This isn't just a historian's guess, it's a forensic fact. When archaeologists began excavations in the 1930s, they uncovered up to a meter of ash beneath the ruins. The fire burned so fiercely that it left stubborn soot on the surviving columns, soaked into the stone and untouched by rain or centuries. Despite the destruction, much survived. In 1979, UNESCO declared Persepolis a World Heritage Site. Today, 14 columns stand restored in the Apadana, but they offer only a faint glimpse of what this stone forest once was. The Gate of All Nations and its guardians, the Lamassu, remain almost perfectly intact, along with the detailed reliefs on the stairs. You can still make out the finest details of clothing, hairstyles, and the gifts the delegations brought. The best preserved palace is Darius's Tachara. It stood apart from the main fire, suffering only burnt edges, preserving for us the oldest and most personal palace in the entire complex. Plutarch wrote that Alexander later regretted what he had done. Once sober, he realized he hadn't just destroyed a tyrant's palace, but a monument to human collaboration, built by the hands of free people from across the known world. Yet the most striking irony lies with the person who started the fire. Thais, an Athenian courtesan, married General Ptolemy. After Alexander's death, Ptolemy became pharaoh of Egypt and founded a dynasty. He went on to establish the Library of Alexandria, the greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world. The woman whose torch burned down one cultural symbol helped lay the foundation for another, even more magnificent. The stone burned. The Achaemenid Empire fell. Alexander's kingdom shattered the moment he died. But the idea behind Persepolis proved stronger than fire and more enduring than any conqueror. The spirit of Nowruz, the festival of renewal and unity, still thrives. Just like thousands of years ago, on the day of the spring equinox, hundreds of millions around the world celebrate the new day. Families gather, light fires, and honor the triumph of light over darkness. In this ritual, passed down through generations, the immortal soul of the burned city lives on.